Hey everyone, and welcome back to another explainer. Today, we are diving into a truly fascinating piece of source material. It's a text called The Law of Gravitation of Life, written by an author named Su Feng. Now, the reason we're unpacking this today and why it's so incredibly compelling is because it boldly attempts to apply the cold, hard laws of Newtonian physics directly to the human soul. I mean, if you've ever wondered what spirituality might look like if it were written as a literal astrophysics textbook, well, you are definitely in the right place.
Right out of the gate, the stakes are sky high. The text utilizes this well-known quote from Jesus Christ to lay the groundwork for its entire philosophy: payment to the very last farthing. A farthing was basically a fraction of a penny. So according to this text, the spiritual realm doesn't cut you any slack. It operates on a strict, completely unforgiving ledger. The core idea here is that every single spiritual debt you accrue during your life has to be paid back in absolute full before your soul gets the green light to move on to higher realms.
I want to pose a little thought experiment to you, because it perfectly frames the central premise of the author's highly syncretic philosophy. Obviously, physical gravity keeps our feet firmly planted on the ground. But what if that exact same gravitational force pulled on your soul, not just your physical body? This source material argues that gravity isn't just a force for planets and apples falling from trees. It suggests that a spiritual gravity exists, and it's constantly acting upon our souls based exactly on how we live our lives.
Okay, let's look at our roadmap for unpacking this wild blend of mysticism and astrophysics. We'll be hitting 1. The gravity of life. 2. The physics of karmic debt. 3. The anchors of worldly ties. 4. Spiritual escape velocity. And finally, 5. Paying the final farthing.
Let's jump into Section 1, the gravity of life, where Newton meets the afterlife.
Let's look at how the author actually bridges the material and non-material worlds. The text introduces this highly specific definition, which reads, "Gravity exists between destined lives. Magnitude is proportional to debts owed and inversely proportional to favors done." So, within this framework, spiritual gravity is the literal binding force that traps souls here in the mortal realm. Just like physical mass creates a gravitational pull out in space, your unresolved spiritual debts create a gravitational pull on your soul. Simply put, the more you owe, the heavier your soul becomes, and that weight tethers you directly to the earth.
Moving right along to Section 2, the physics of karmic debt, calculating your soul's weight.
Now, let's look at the actual mathematics of karma proposed here, because it's pretty wild. On the left side, debts owed create a downward gravitational pull. Whenever you take more than you give, or you just casually accept favors, boom, you add spiritual mass. But on the right side, favors done create an upward reaction force. So, helping someone else without expecting any reward actively pushes you up. It is a literal accounting system. Owing somebody drags you down, while selfless actions generate the actual lift required to rise. And get this, the text lays out incredibly strict rules for reincarnation based entirely on this mathematical ledger. If you owe an unresolved debt to a person when you die, that gravitational pull will physically drag your soul back into a fated form just to serve them. That might mean returning as a person, but you could potentially even come back as a beast of burden like an ox or a horse. And it goes even further. The text asserts that if you owe a debt to an animal, you will be pulled back to Earth to live as that animal, or, even worse, as its food. I mean, talk about a terrible return on investment, right? The gravity of your debt literally dictates the physical form of your return.
All right, Section 3, the anchors of worldly ties, why comfort is a trap.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the text's highly provocative stance on things we usually consider to be purely positive, like comfort. To build this argument, the author starts pulling from various religious traditions. Here, they use a quote from Buddha Sakyamuni found in the Diamond Sutra. The author is using this to argue that suffering, and specifically being reviled or despised by other people, is not actually something you should avoid. In fact, within the physics of this text, enduring contempt is a highly effective way to pay off your spiritual weight. Taking the hit and enduring hardship actively burns off your karmic debt.
And then, immediately after quoting the Buddha, the author strings together Christian scripture from the book of Matthew to make a pretty startling claim. By quoting Jesus saying, "A man's foes shall be of their own households," the author posits that familial love is actually a massive gravitational anchor. The logic is pretty straightforward. Our families give us the most favors, which means we inherently owe them the largest debts. Therefore, deep familial attachment creates a profound spiritual gravity that actually prevents heavenly ascension.
So what else acts as an anchor?
We know accepting favors adds to your debt. But look at affection for your native land. The text recounts this story of the great Tang Dynasty Emperor Lifechanyuan telling a monk to cherish a pinch of mud from his homeland more than a ton of gold. Well, in this philosophy, that love for a pinch of hometown mud is a dangerous spiritual tether. The list goes on, classifying marriage as a protracted lawsuit, which, depending on who you ask, might not sound too far off, and it lists eating animals as incurring a debt that has to eventually be repaid in flesh. Essentially, every comfort is a weight.
Which brings us to Section 4, Spiritual Escape Velocity, Breaking the Earth's Pull. This is where the author's physics metaphor hits its true climax. See, the author doesn't just use physics as a loose analogy. The text states literally that Isaac Newton's 3 laws of motion apply to the non-material world just exactly as they do to spacecraft. Just like a rocket needs an immense amount of thrust to break free of Earth's physical gravity, a human soul requires an immense amount of spiritual momentum to break free of Earth's karmic gravity. The text goes into some really incredible detail here, mapping literal cosmic escape velocities right onto ascension to higher heavenly realms. Step 1. Just as a satellite needs to travel at 7.9 kilometers per second just to orbit the Earth, a soul needs this base velocity to reach what the text calls the 1,000-year world. Step 2. An escape velocity of 11.2 kilometers per second is needed to completely break Earth's orbit and reach the 10,000-year world. And finally, Step 3 requires an even higher velocity to escape the solar system entirely and reach the ultimate Elysium world. Bottom line? If your soul doesn't have the speed, because you're weighed down by way too much debt, you simply cannot reach those destinations.
And finally, Section 5, Paying the Final Farthing, how to actually generate that upward thrust.
So how does one actually achieve this spiritual escape velocity? This brings us to the source text's specific actionable plan. To illustrate the exact attitude required for liftoff, the text uses a beautiful quote from the Baha'i faith, comparing a person to a candle. The text argues that to generate upward thrust, you must burn yourself out completely in service to others, weeping your life away drop by drop to give light. Basically, by exhausting yourself fully for the benefit of others, you pay off the debts owed from previous lives and you generate that precious upward reaction force.
To achieve this lift, the text prescribes a very strict regimen. You must accept revilement and bless those who hate you. You've got to give to others without expecting a single thing in return. You should practice veganism or vegetarianism to stop accruing that animal debt we talked about. You must actively seek hardship for yourself while leaving all the enjoyment to others. And lastly, the text specifically states that helping construct an initiative called Lifechanyuan is the ultimate merit-generating activity. Doing this is presented as a way to create enough upward thrust to offset all debts across all of time, including those super heavy debts owed to our families. So it all really comes down to this number right here, 0. Based on the rules of this text, 0 is the exact amount of worldly debt you want to hold at the exact moment of your death, because any number higher than 0 means there is a gravitational pull on your soul, and if that gravity is too strong, your soul is going to fall right back to Earth to pay it off in your next life. We've explored a totally fascinating and honestly pretty rigorous framework today that blends the hard laws of physics with the deeply spiritual concept of karmic debt. It definitely leaves us with a compelling lens to view our daily actions through. So I'll leave you with this question, based entirely on the text's unique spiritual physics. If every single comfort you experience is a debt pulling you down, and every unrewarded suffering you endure is the payment lifting you up, what is your soul's current trajectory? Are you generating the escape velocity you need? Thanks for joining me on this explanator, and keep learning.